In this video, we're going to reseal the oil pan. It's a little car. It sat in the field for a very long time, probably about 7 or 8 years. And then I bought it and cleaned the fuel tank and stuff out on it and been driving it. It's been a good little car, but it's got a few little issues, and I'm going to take you along for the ride as I repair some of this stuff. You start off, I let the car get good and warm because we're going to drain the oil out of it. And you won't get as much of it as you can out because you'll actually be removing the pan that holds it. Open the hood. Once the car's warm, you're going to jack it up like this. You'll put your jack stands under it, and then you go from there. I'll pick back up here in just a moment. And in this case, I have my jack stands back. I'm going to start using those. Sometimes you just have a few more little projects and what you have tools to work with, so you improvise. But in this case, the jack stands have gotten free. I'm going to put one under the driver's side of the core support, the other one's under the passenger side rocker panel. This car's not very high off the ground, we're going to go ahead and turn the wheels. That way it'll open up a little more of this area to lay under the car. Once you get the wheel turned there, it opens up a little more area, especially on that corner to work in. I'm going to get some tools and collect them. I'll drop the tools that are required into the captions on the photos and the video. I'll pick back up momentarily. And I've already got the wrench out. It's a 17mm oil drain plug. I'm going to come up here. Always what I like to do when I'm either changing oil or have to drain it, I take the oil cap off. And down here's your dipstick. I usually just pull it up so you can at least see it kind of poking its little head up here. But let's get under the car here. And it's going to be pretty dark. I'll move the light down here on the next video. So what we're going to do, we're just going to break this drain plug loose. And I'll show y'all the reason that we're going to do this. We got our oil draining. It's pretty clean. It's got about 1,500 miles on it, so this motor should be pretty clean inside. And it's never a bad idea when you're doing something like this to replace your old drain plug gasket. But we're going to let this drain probably 20 or 30 minutes. I just want to get all the oil out of it. Try to make the least of a mess as possible. So I'm going to let it do its thing, and then I'll be back. And we're back here. I went and got a fresh drill battery. And a little extension here. You go in my 1/4 inch impact driver. I always like to lay a little clean towel down so you can kind of get these nuts and little washers that are up here in the front corner. And then you always drop it in a pan of oil. That's about what usually happens. So we can go in here and remove them one at a time. So far we're at 3, 4, 5, and at this point, since I already dropped that washer, I'm sitting here thinking it might be a good idea to just go ahead and put the oil plug back in it. move the pan of oil. So if we drop anything, we drop it on the concrete floor instead of having to dig it out of a mess. So we don't have a fancy lift or anything here, so we're just going to lay on the ground and do this. I just want to show y'all that when you don't have a lift or a bunch of fancy tools, you can still do this stuff. Just sometimes you have to get creative with how you do it. And I was counting the bolts. I'll give you a bolt count once I get them all out here. If you notice, I've not pulled the exhaust off of it. If I remember correctly, you can pull this pan without dealing with that. I've never had these bolts off. Who knows if they've ever been off before. So. As far as exhaust goes, we do know that the oil pan has been off before. But basically, you just want to get the car up high enough you can get under it. And you can see this stuff. Sometimes using wood block when you jack something up helps. Get it up a little higher. You just got to make sure it's centered well. And we're going to have to, we got one bolt that's going to be fun here. So I'm going to get a little extension here to put on my already long extension. I'll be right back. And I'm just a few seconds later. I just went and got a little short 3-inch, 1/4-inch wrap extension. Add on to this already 7 or 8 inch long quarter driver extension. There's only one of these bolts that's kind of hard to get to. But this car also still has the factory exhaust. And that's not really helping things as far as clearance back here. And that's exactly why I moved the pan of oil a while ago. So a grand total of bolts is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 bolts, 1 nut and washer, and the oil pan's loose. Depending on how well it's sealed, you may have to grab a little small screwdriver. You just kind of pop it loose. So I'm going to jump up and grab one of those real quick, and I'll be right back. So I'm back. Grabbed a little flathead screwdriver, a body hammer, because it was the first thing I seen. And I've got other hammers, but they're locked up in my toolbox. And you want to be real gentle here, because if you bend the pan, you're going to have to straighten the pan back up. But you see, it did bend just a slight bit right here. But that RTV holds pretty well. And we do have another nut right here that I missed. That was my bad. So there's 2 nuts. And 2 washers. Once you get them off, your pan will drop down. And most of the time, you can rotate it 90 degrees right here. It'll drop down, come off the pickup tube. So at this point, you can see all up inside your motor. And if you can see here, there's not a whole lot of RTV right here around this stud hole. Right here in this corner. And if you look here at this pan, there's also very little right here. And you can actually see right here where it's not sealed and it was coming out. So I'm going to clean this stuff up and I'll bring y'all along and show you. But now's a good time to make sure you pick up tube screens. Not got a bunch of junk and dirt in it. This one has a few little pieces. I'll clean that up. The inside of the motor's fairly clean. Not real bad for a 102,000 mile car. So I'm going to pause the video for just a second, wipe my hands off, all that good stuff, and I'll be right back. So now I've got the oil pan set to the side, the bolts are set to the side, and I went and got a couple more little tools that I'm going to need to, clean all this RTV off. You can use wire brush. They do sell RTV remover and spray. I've never used it, but what I do have, I have a carbide scraper. You can get these off any of your tool trucks. I believe Harbor Freak may have them also. So usually what I'll do, I'll just take a little brake cleaner, just kind of a little spritz here, just kind of kill some of the oily residue that's dripping down over everything. And I'm going to go ahead and spray this oil pickup tube out real good. Just make sure there's no big particles of junk, because if it gets stopped up, you're not going to have no oil pressure. And don't worry about your bearings up here. There's still oil in there. I literally just barely missed it. So with carbide scraper, you just kind of come in here and you're just going to scrape all this old RTV off. Like so. And luckily there's not a whole lot, because they've done a pretty poor job. Which is not unusual, because not a lot of people care about these cars very much. Usually it's just about what's cheapest and quickest. And you don't always get quality when you do that. And as you see here, the scraper don't really fit up in here right here. That's going to be kind of a problem. But like I said, it don't have to be 100% perfect right now. You do have to get all the old RTV off. But I'm going to come back in here with another one of my favorite tools, a wire brush on my little impact drill. I'm just going to get around these studs right here real good. I'm going to give this another brake clean bath, just in case any pieces of the RTV get slung up in the engine. And we'll do a visual inspection before we go any further. But at this point, I'm going to pause you again. I'm going to get up and swap some tools around, and I'll be back. And I'm back again. It's just literally just seconds in these little pauses here. Didn't figure everybody wanted to hear me grunting, getting up and down, or waiting to see me dig tools. But I just got a little wire brush right here on my impact driver. I'm just going to come in here and just clean around these studs a little bit, and around some of these bolt holes. You notice I'm not really getting wild here with the speed, because we don't want to sling the little wire bristles out either. We just want to do enough just to kind of rust the surface up just a touch. And it helps, get the RTV out of some of these bolt holes and stuff. Once you do that, you can kind of, you're not going to be necessarily clean, but it'll be a lot cleaner than you were. But I just run over it. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to have to go in here and I'm going to have to clean some of these thread holes out. Get a little more cleaning to do. Of course, we still got oil dripping. And that's going to be important later. But I'm going to jump back up, grab a few more things, and I'll be right back. And these little bore cleaning brushes, you can get these at your local import discount store usually. But these are real helpful for like going up in these little holes right here. And because it's wire brush, it generally won't damage your threads. You're just going in here with your fingers. You can run these up in here, and it'll grab that RTV and just pull it right out. It's a pretty quick, easy process. It keeps your threads clean, because if you don't keep your threads clean, you'll end up breaking some bolts. And nobody likes extracting bolts. It's never fun, and these are little bitty small threaded bolts anyway. You'll just take it and run it around in there until the RTV falls out. And this is a steel bristled brush. And it just kind of grabs it and pulls most of it out. And like I said, it don't have to be perfect, but you don't want to get in a situation where you have to extract the bolt because you didn't do a good cleaning job. And you can work on turning this different directions if you have some stubborn RTV to get out. It also works pretty decent to kind of get it around the bottom of the studs, clean them up. But like I said, it's not perfect, but I'm going to go back in here with a razor blade, especially in these spots back here where I couldn't really get anything else. Other than that, it's pretty clean. I might run over it again and make one more pass, but we'll see. I'll be right back. The biggest key thing though, like anytime you do stuff like this, the cleaner it is, the better results you're going to have. And when dealing with the room temperature vulcanizing sealant, it don't like to stick to its old stuff. It won't stick to oil for sure. So I cut a little small piece of a red Scotch-Brite pad here. And I'm just going to work all around this oil pan rail on the block. And you don't want to gouge none of this stuff with like a razor blade or anything. You can use them, you just got to be careful. Everything I've used so far is pretty much showing you a way to do it and not cause any damage. So I'm going to get this kind of good and clean here. And I'm going to clean around some of these edges up here too, where there's some old nasty caked up grease and stuff from just over time. But at this point, it's pretty clean. There's no reason that your RTV won't stick. I'm kind of get up in here and just kind of give it another little spritz, especially up here where it's had some previous oil leaks over the years. A couple of them I've already fixed up top, like the distributor leaking and the oil sending unit up there and that kind of stuff. You get it sometimes from sloppy oil changes. And let's just face it, not everybody keeps their engines clean, so as long as I've been doing this, it's pretty normal to see some nasty greasy stuff over the years. So when you get it cleaned up, it should look reasonably like this. You can still see some orange tint here and there, but there's no RTV chunks. So that's what you want. Got something stuck in this tube. And this is always a good time to kind of inspect stuff like this. And that looks like a piece of blue plastic. May have been from an oil cap seal or something at one time. When you just punch that stuff in your oil bottles, it ends up in your oil pan. So that's always something to remember also. So I'm going to pause right here. I'm going to get up and I'm going to show y'all how to clean the oil pan up. So I'm back here. What I've done, I got a little paint cup. I put a little acetone in it. You could use a little bit of gas or lacquer thinner or anything like that. I'm not going to use that to clean my oil pan, but you get all these bolts with RTV jammed all in the threads, and they're greasy, and all these nuts and stuff right here. I usually do something like this, and it's a trick I've learned over the years. You got a good chemical cleaner like that that's strong. You'll just put these fillers in here and put them to the side and let them soak for about 30 minutes. When you come back, there won't be no RTV on them. And if you do, and if they do, you'll just clean it out. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to have a look down the side of our oil pan. This is also a chance to, like I said, clean your pickup tube screen. Check in here. See if you have any metal or anything in here, or any foreign substances. In here it looks pretty clean. There's no sludge buildup. There is a little dent up here at the front of the oil pan. Right here. And I may try to give it a little tap out. There's some little dents down here in the bottom. I may try to straighten them up. But basically what you're going to do, you're just going to take your carbide scraper. You're just going to come go around here. And it works good just to get these are really designed for smooth surfaces, which these oil pans aren't. They're dished down in here. But we're just going to use it to kind of take the mass amount off of it. Once you get the mass off of it, which wasn't a whole lot really, but it do have some RTV that come off, you'll be left with something like this. And you can pull it off with your fingers or whatever you have to do, but here's our little offending corner leak right here. And you can see it wasn't really sealed at all. So at this point, usually what I'll do, I'll just grab my wire brush, and it's going to be hard to video and do this too, so I'll probably pause it and jump back, but wire brushes do a real good job. When they're not fine like this, you need a coarse wire brush. You usually run it in reverse, and it'll come right off. I'll be right back. Wrong tool for the job. But basically what you're going to do, I went and got a little coarser wire brush. It's about wore out, so it's pretty rough. You're just going to come in here and hold this pan. And it'll pretty much just cut all of it off. And it does scratch the metal up a little bit. This is a little too coarse to do this with. But the coarseness is actually going to help you in this case. And I'll show you why. I'm going to go through, I'm just going to go ahead and get this RTV off. And I'll be right back. And I'm just going to pop back in. I'm about done here. And once you get to this point, you'll notice you got a whole lot of junk just all in your oil pan. It's all gritty and stuff. Now, we're going to clean that up too. So generally what I'll do, if you don't have a buttload of brake cleaner to use, you can go down to your local hardware store and get some mineral spirits. And usually I'll just I'm going to use a little bit here, and I'm just going to let this pan kind of soak on the inside. Now, you always want to use gloves and stuff when dealing with chemicals and eye protection, all that good stuff. But basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of soak all this a little bit and let it sit here and soak, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we clean this up. But for now, it's going to soak for about 10 minutes. And we're back here. I went and disposed of the oil in the proper way. Put the oil pan inside the drain pan. Since not all of you have parts washers, I'm going to pour a little more mineral spirits in here. Or paint thinner, or whatever kind of clean chemical you want to use. Always use a well ventilated area. Always dispose of this stuff in a proper way when you're done with it. So basically what I do, doing it this way, you just kind of make your own little parts washer. It also lets you clean your drain pan out. And you can always use a funnel and stuff like that. And pour it right back in the jug it come out of. And if you don't want to hold on to it to reuse later, because this stuff will usually last a few cleanings, and it's one of the things that's still relatively inexpensive. But just gonna get in here with a towel and obviously wear you some gloves if you're so inclined. I've done this for a long time. I don't have a lot of feeling in my hands anymore. And this stuff really don't irritate my skin. So you're just going to continue doing that until you end up with something shiny and clean. I still got a lot more clean to do on this. So I'm going to let this kind of soak in here. If you're doing this out in the sun, you can take your towel that you're using, or a brush, or whatever that you're scrubbing with, but you need to get your little towel and you can just lay it over your oil pan like this. It'll hold the chemicals on top of it and let you clean it, or let it soak with it on it. But I'll be right back. And after you get done cleaning it with mineral spirits, I took it outside and sprayed it with some degreaser to get the oily residue from the mineral spirits off of it. And give it a good wash out with water hose. Make sure there's no chunks of RTV down in the baffle here or stuck anywhere. Now, if yours was like mine, I've done went in here and straightened the pan rail up, but you can do that. You just need to make sure it's on a flat surface. Use something like this punch and just straighten it up where it's needed. This old pan was pretty beat up. If you remember showing you that big gash in it right here, I took and beat that back out straight. There's no holes in it. I beat this back out here, all with this punch and this big hammer. And that left us with a somewhat straight oil pan. It's not beautiful, but it'll work. Anytime you start hitting on something like this, you need to make sure that the pan rail here, when you're on a flat surface, it's flat. If it don't, you need to straighten it up. But at this point, I'm going to sand this thing down a little bit, give it a little spritz, and try to make it look like new. So hold on, I'll be right back. And at this point, I scuffed it up and I sprayed it down with a little brake cleaner, wiped it down, a little primer on it, let it tack up. I'm going here with this satin black enamel and give it a little bit of color, just in some light coats. I'm not going to cram a lot of paint on this thing, just enough to make it look a little better. Like I told you before, when you take your car to the shop, you're just going to get your old nasty oil pan put back on there. When you do it yourself, you get a little more care, and you can clean it up and paint this stuff as needed. I'm going to let this coat tack, and I'll be right back. Now, it's a few minutes later, and we're tacked up pretty well. It's still a little sticky, so we're just going to go ahead and give it another coat here. Like I said, I'm just looking for just enough to cover. I'm just trying to make it look a little better, because it is my car and I care a little bit, or I wouldn't be fixing some of this stuff. So this will probably be my last coat on this, so I'm just going through, just making sure that I at least got some even coverage here. And you always want to be mindful for overspraying stuff. You want to do it in a well ventilated area, and sometimes it's just not possible, but here we're just painting on an old Geo roof that I just happen to have laying in my backyard. So maybe these leaves won't fall in this until it dries, but it looks a lot better than it did. And while we're waiting on our oil pan to dry, we're up here to our second portable workbench, also known as a washing machine. The bolts have been soaking in here for a little while, probably about 15 minutes actually. It's not taking a real long time to get this stuff kind of cleaned up, but I'm just going to show y'all. Remember, all these bolts were covered in RTV, all oily. This one still got a little grease on it, so we're just going to come in here and with a little brass brush and just going to agitate this a little bit. And I'm going to repeat that another 16 times. If I get a little RTV on them still like this one, I'm just going to take your little brass brush and go in here and just kind of clean that stuff off. Most of the time it'll come off super easy because you've been soaking it. I'm just going to go here and just clean this stuff up a little better. Might put them back in here to re-soak for a few more minutes. Might not, it just depends on how things go. I got a little bit of time because I'm waiting on the oil pan and paint dry on it. And you can't do anything with wet paint, so I'm just going to go in here and clean this stuff up a little bit, and if I feel like I need to, I might run a dye over them. Just depending on how the threads look, but so far it looks like everything's reasonably clean. I'm just going to repeat. Well, it's really been quite a little while since I started this, but not because of what I was doing. I had some other stuff come up, but got the bolts cleaned up, and you can see there's no big globs of RTV on any of the threads. There is some remnants still up there at the top edge, and that's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. Our pan's all cleaned up, and while it's still rough, it's good and dry, ready to put back on. So let's get it to the point where we're ready to go back on the car. So I'm going to grab some RTV and we'll go from there. So basically what I got here, I'm going to use some of this right here. This is 1 minute back in the service gasket maker. I usually like to, after I do this, I like to let them sit a little while, but basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to run a little bead. And like most of the time with these cans, they're pretty, they're finicky. So I'm just going to run a little bead. Basically my camera died and I had to charge it up, and I'd already put the RTV on the oil pan, so I had to go ahead and put it on. But anytime you ever tighten any of your little small bolts, you'll use just a 1/4 inch drive ratchet. And I just barely even snug them up. The important thing here is that they're all tightened, and you tighten them evenly. And you want to see just a little bit of RTV just smushed out around the edges. One thing I did mention to forgot to mention was this car don't have the flywheel cover on it. So that's one thing you will have to remove. It's held on by 10mm headed bolts also. and you'll just remove it to access the rear oil pan bolts. But at this point, it's all tightened up and the little drain plug's tight. Already tightened it up. I cleaned up some of this oil residue up under here the best I could. So at this point, you're going to put your oil in it. You'll start the car up and let it run. Just make sure you're not going to have any leaks. So let's get to putting some oil in it. And at this point, you know, you're going to use a funnel. Already pre-cleaned the funnel out. And you're just going to put whatever favorite oil that you run in your car back in it. I didn't change the oil filter on this car because I had just changed the oil in it previously. But now would be a good time just to go ahead and put a new one on it. I'm going to start off with about 3 quarts. I'll start the car up, let it run a few minutes, and then I'll check the oil level again just to verify everything's okay. And just a little bit more there. We should be good. I want to check the oil dipstick first, just to make sure that our oil level's okay. Where I started at. We could use just a touch more. I'm going to go ahead and add that. I don't know if you can hear that oil going down in there, but it's making some gurgly sounds. And it will take a little while for it all to run down into the bottom of the oil pan. But removing oil pan, cleaned it out, always get you just a little bit lower than normal. And I'm going to show y'all here. You probably can't see it, but the full mark's right there, and it's dead on it. You can see the little oil residue in the hole. So at this point, I'm just going to start it up and let the motor get warm. Put the dipstick back in it. I'm going to take this funnel out. I'll start it up and let it run a few minutes, and then I'll bring y'all back. And at this point, we've ran a little while. Everything's perfectly dry. Everything seems to be happy and quiet. And here in just a few more minutes, I'm going to turn it off and check the oil level, but we should be good. And all in all, that's how you reseal an oil pan on a Geo Metro. The 94 up cars, or actually 95 up cars, have a crank sensor. It's going to be right about right here. You just unbolt it and take it out. Pretty much the same procedure. So, good luck.